how do you from that place without kicking yourself? And I used to be an expert at kicking myself. I don't anymore. I do exactly what Kanani just said. I accept responsibility. The things didn't work out for whatever reason, and what can I learn from it, and then move from there, instead of trying to change yesterday. But some people end up making a conclusion that I'm not really good at this. I'm not really good at sales. I'm not really good at this. And what you just said about, being in tune with yourself, personal development, your mind. So we sometimes in business and in attracting your clients, sometimes we focus so much externally in the what we say, in the what we do, as opposed to focusing internally as to the person you become, the person who you are. Because when you embody, when I say the word your client, so you become your client, you become a magnet. And it's not an external thing, it's an internal thing. You adapt the right mindset, right? You have the right attitude. You craft your message. So you're not just like kind of shooting in the dark. You just say anything that comes to your mind. When I was going back to Danielle, because one of the things that Danielle taught me way back when was about where we speak from, about the conscious and the subconscious mind. And the fact that we speak 95% of what we say, 93 to 95% of what we say is from our subconscious mind. We don't even think about it. We don't just, it just comes from it's almost like, it's like running a program. And then we're in control of the 5% we say. I sat back and I realized that the only way I can change what I say, the only way I can change who I am and what comes out of my mouth when I meet Kanani for the first time and we're having a conversation, I may be thinking it's a conscious conversation, but it's actually a subconscious conversation because, hey, 90%, if 90% is subconscious, it's a subconscious conversation. It's almost like a sleeping conversation. Scary. I realized that I needed to change what was inside of me. That's the most important thing. That you attract your ideal client by what you become, by basically by your 90%, which is your subconscious self. Because you will meet your client online, they send you, ping your message, and then you start you were not prepared. It wasn't a meeting, right? You go to a networking event, you don't know who you're going to meet, because I know, Kanani, you and Marina met at an event. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So you hadn't kind of, prepared your script. You hadn't prepared. You're going to meet Marina, and this is what you're going to say. So when you met, you spoke from your 90%. You spoke from your heart.
Yes, that's completely true. Had no clue who we were meeting.
and this is and here we are today, right? So via Marina. Here we are co-hosting a radio show, and it was through the one meeting. It was a meeting that you hadn't put in your diary, so you kind of spent the night before going through the notes, and on your way you're kind of trying to rehearse. This is what I'm going to say because this is the right thing to say to a future coach or a future client. But the meeting happened, and speaking from your 90%, your subconscious, which is already in you, and so. We need to focus internally in terms of who we are, our mindset, our attitude, what are our values, what are our philosophies, what do we live by, what do we agree with, all things which are about you. So that when someone messages you, you meet somebody, you're speaking from the place that you are, and that's the place that connects with your ideal client. So over Kanani to you, because I can go on about this, because when I learned how powerful your subconscious is, and then I realized that I'm only in charge of the 5% of what comes out of my mouth, of what I say, I was like, hey, I need to change the 90%. So that basically, regardless of where I am, if you ever meet me, it's the same stuff that will come out. whether I was ready for the meeting or I wasn't ready for the meeting. And I normally say this, and I'm actually probably going to use a completely different analogy, a different drink, because I always use the same drink, a very well branded drink. This is how powerful branding is. But if on my desk, in my office right now, I have a cup of coffee, right? And if I shook that cup of coffee, this is how I think when you think about this, the power of your subconscious mind and the power of what is it that you put in your subconscious, who you become on the internal, is you're like the. And if I shake this cup of coffee all over my desk, there's only one thing that will spill, and it'll be coffee. And so what you fill yourself with, what you become on the inside, when you find yourself in the meeting, that's the 95% that comes out. And that's what attracts your ideal clients. It's not the well-rehearsed speech, because in that moment, it's only like 5% of that will come out. The 95%, I'll even be generous, and 90%, so you can, what you had rehearsed, right, is literally 10% of what you had rehearsed, 90% is what was already in you, that is part of you. Kanani.
That's completely true, because, when you're thinking about it, you got to go back to also the psychology of the brain, because we are literally living off of our subconscious. And so a lot of people, when you're doing business, you don't come across these type of case studies unless you're studying psychology at the same time, or you are involved in personal growth. Somewhere along the way, you start to see the case studies and the different background research on how our subconscious works. And that's exactly right. 94 to 95% of our brains and everything that we do in life is working from what we've already learned subconsciously. So subconsciously, we are exerting our fears, our feelings, our viewpoints, our belief system, everything that we know. And all of it, most of it at least, comes from the first 3 to 5 years of our life. And that's something that a lot of people don't really know. I happen to know that because I've been raising my daughter, and I've been learning a lot about children and the background psychology of their brain. And as I've studied that, I began to understand, wow, a lot of what we do in our life, no matter what it is, we are actually mirroring our childhood. The fears that we have today, there are certain things from our childhood that created some of those fears as we went through life. So it's very interesting to really study, but you wouldn't know these things unless you actually do get involved in personal growth. So those who are in business, you have to take into account that who you are is really coming from your subconscious. That's why there's a lot of personal growth and different programs to get involved with. It's more about training your brain and rewiring any other types of belief systems that are not helping you build your business. Whatever the cognitive side of your brain, however way it's working, sometimes it just needs that additional affirmation, additional book, additional program that kind of helps to rewire your brain and reset your habits. And it's not bad. It's a good thing because you're growing as a business owner. You're understanding that from where you are at right now, you may not know what in the world is going on with you, but you also understand that, well, I am growing and I am learning and I am doing something and something's happening. Well, this is what's happening, is your brain is transforming based on your new habits, based on you putting aside old habits and all of those things. So even your judgment, going back to actually, not judging other people and the politics and all of those, a lot of that stems from our subconscious. If we were stereotypical of someone in a certain position, whether it's a single mom or a stay-at-home parent or two parents or divorced, all of those belief systems come from our subconscious, so it's almost like we automatically judge. And so whoever we are right now, we are showing who we are in that moment and with our entire belief system. And a lot of people don't realize that that's why you have to incorporate personal growth into your business. That's why you have to develop yourself as a leader, because you don't want to portray something that you didn't mean to. Does that make sense?
It makes absolutely perfect sense, Kanani, and I agree with you. And sometimes I almost, when I sometimes always think it's really, really unfortunate, because there's so much to learn that can help us out there, and we don't have access to it. There's a lot of information that, if we're very profound, that if we did find out, you cannot but change. You cannot help but change, because it's that profound. And what you just said about, in terms of like, we operate from basically the inner child is this big adult. There's a little girl, there's a little boy inside of you that's actually making decisions for you. And a lot of people will say, of course not, right? But Kanani, like yourself, I'm totally fascinated by human behavior. I have always been fascinated in human behavior. And in my quest to understand human behavior, I've done a lot of research to understand why we do the things we do. And also, I'm an immigrant, as a lot of people would put it, even though I actually do not categorize myself as an immigrant. I was born in Africa. In Africa, I went to school in Africa, and then I moved over to England and have for 20 years, and now I'm in LA. And I've worked across like different cultures, and one of the things that fascinate me is people, is human behavior. And I ask myself, I'm one of 12. Why am I so different to my brothers and sisters? I schooled in Africa, walking however many 6 miles a day or more barefoot to school, in a classroom of however many 50 kids, right? And there was about 3 streams. Why am I still so different from media? There's asking all these questions. Why am I different? Why do I do things different? Or why does that person behave the way they behave? Why do they do things different? And also trying to look at the little girl I was to the woman I am today. Are they very different? Are they very separate? Do I still behave as an adult version of the little girl me? Do I really bring that into business, the way I interact with people, the same way I interacted with my friends in primary school? Sounds really deep. And I've also got totally fascinated into how the mind works, and I've done a lot of research, a lot of study into how the mind works, into what I believe, what I feed my mind, what I tell myself, or what other people tell me. What stops me from being the best I could ever be? What stops me from stepping out and doing some crazy thing and coming back to your inner child, in terms of, you kind of doing your studies with your children and actually thinking, okay, this is the way you do. I found this guy, he's done a lot of research. When I was doing a business degree, and part of it, we had to cultures and understand the different cultures, how different people groups behave in management. And this guy, he is Dutch, his name is Geert Hofs. He's done a lot of research. And one of the conclusions that I took away and still say is this. He says that our beliefs and our core values are all formed by the age of 10, Kanani. Mm-hmm. So what you're teaching your child now, up to the age of 10, that's it. You've created it. You've created a blueprint. And it doesn't matter what age we become, you're always calling back from the blueprint. And it's very important that when you're doing business, when you're doing life, we find ourselves it's almost like a cycle. You try and get yourself out of something, and then you find yourself doing the same thing. You kick yourself, and this time you promise yourself that you will never do it again. And you go off and you find yourself do it again. And it's then people get so frustrated because what is going on? I thought I had dealt with this. But because the program that's running was from before the age of 10. This guy, he's an expert. Look him up, Geert Hofstede, right? He is Dutch. He's done loads and loads of research. There are loads of papers, free papers online that you can access to find out your